There's Dr. Blackstock. Hey, Doc. Doc, come over here. Thank you so much, Doc. Oh, there are the Blackstock girls. Your mother is so amazing. This is what my twin sister Oni and I heard as we walked through the hospital with our mother, Dr. Dale Blackstock. The year was 1986, and our mother was a physician at a public hospital in Brooklyn, New York. My twin sister Oni and I, we were about 9 years old as we witnessed our mother being beloved by everyone in the hospital, from the staff to her colleagues. Even her patients were giving her a hug. Now, how many people are hugging their doctors? My mother was a petite woman, and she wore her hair in a short, natural fro. She was kind and warm, but when she was with her patients, she would be focused. She wanted to listen to every single word that they had to say. She wanted to know what was going on with their family and friends. After all, she was actually from the very same neighborhood where the hospital was located. She understood where they were coming from, and her patients loved her for it. She was always bringing home tokens of appreciation from them, a knitted shawl, homemade cookies, or cake. You wouldn't believe it, but when I was a little girl, I thought that most physicians were Black women. My mother used to take us to meetings of a local organization where she was a physician and the president, and we would sit in the back of the room, my sister and me, listening in intently as these brilliant women talked about community programs and projects in our Brooklyn community. They were our role models. They were our reality. We wanted to be just like them. But it wasn't until I got older that I realized that it wasn't the reality. It sure wasn't for our mother. My mother grew up in poverty in Brooklyn, on public assistance. She was a descendant of enslaved Black Americans. She had never even seen a Black physician in real life. One time she told me in high school, at her Catholic high school, she told one of the nuns that she wanted to pursue a career in medicine. The nun laughed, despite her excellent grades, and said to her, "Maybe you can consider becoming a social worker." Can you believe that? Well, my mother ended up being the first person in her family to go to college. And it was in college that she met her first mentor, Dr. Clyde Dillard, her chemistry professor, a Black man. He took great interest in her academic success, and he encouraged her to apply to medical school. And guess what happened? She applied to medical school and got into all of her medical schools. She ended up matriculating at Harvard Medical School. It wasn't easy for her, but she finished and she became a physician. At 19 years old, my twin sister and I lost our mother to acute myelogenous leukemia. She was only 47 years old, the age I am right now. But her legacy continues. Both my sister and I ended up applying and accepted to Harvard Medical School. We were the school's first Black mother-daughter legacy graduates. Thank you. We both became physicians. I became an ER physician. I decided on emergency medicine because I thought it was the best way to help those in need. But soon after I started practicing, I recognized that the emergency room is where our society's social problems come home to roost. You see, people who use the ER often don't have health insurance. They're often sicker than other people. These are things that I wish I knew when I was younger, but I didn't know what I didn't know. I also noticed something when I was a child. The neighborhood that I grew up in, Brooklyn, I loved it. I loved my neighbors, but I noticed that my neighborhood looked different than other neighborhoods. My parents, they didn't feel comfortable sending us to the public schools there. We didn't have a grocery store. We always had to drive to another neighborhood to get our groceries. We didn't have parks, and we didn't have a lot of trees. I had even seen a few people get shot on my block when I was a kid. I didn't know why, but I knew something was amiss. It wasn't until I got older that I learned that my neighborhood was a formerly redlined neighborhood, which means it had been deprived of just the basic resources needed to provide people with healthy lives. And then as a physician, I learned that neighborhoods that are redlined as a result of former discriminatory federal housing policies, that those neighborhoods actually have the very worst health outcomes. It took my journey from child to student to practicing physician to learn the truth. I wrote Legacy for my younger self. It is the book that I wish I could have read when I was 18 years old. Would you believe me if I told you that I didn't really understand the impact of racial health inequities until about 5 years ago? I was working in an urgent care in my old neighborhood in Brooklyn in the spring of 2020. And as many of you recall, we were the epicenter of the COVID pandemic. Within weeks, I noticed that most of my patients coming in with COVID were Black and brown. And I knew that this virus would devastate our communities. There were times during that spring where I literally was seeing about 100 patients per 12-hour shift. I was walking into what seemed like an endless number of exam rooms when one day I walked into a room with a young Black woman. The electronic medical record had said she was there with shortness of breath. As I walked into the room, I saw her sitting on the exam table. She was hunched over, her head in her hands. As I walked in, she looked up and she gave me a quick once-over. "Hi, I'm Dr. Blackstock. How can I help you today?" She said, "Can I ask you something? Are you Black?" I realized with all of my PPE, personal protective equipment on, my bonnet, my goggles, my double mask, my head-to-toe gown, that she couldn't tell who I was or what I was. "Yes, I am." She let out a sigh, her body almost collapsing. "Thank you, Doc. At least now I know you'll listen to me." Can you see why our presence is so important to our patients? To be honest, I was very happy in that moment to be the doctor that she needed, but I also knew that there was a larger issue at hand. I knew that I had to write about what I was seeing in the pandemic. So I started writing op-eds. I finished my first op-ed by the end of March. I became one of the first voices in the pandemic to write about racial health inequities. A few op-eds turned into radio and TV interviews and then turned into an exclusive contract as a medical contributor with a cable news outlet. I had no idea that was the direction that my life would take me. But not only was my writing creating more awareness of this crisis at hand, but I soon learned that legislators were using my writing to inform their policy decisions about keeping their communities safe. And while I didn't know that's the direction things would end up, I knew that if my mother was there, that she would be so proud of me for making a difference. I want to make one thing clear. Everyone has the right to be healthy. Everyone. And being healthy is more than just about having access to good health care. It's about having healthy communities. Would you believe me if I told you that your life expectancy, how long you live, depends more on your zip code than your genetic code? Your life expectancy, how long you live, depends more on your zip code than your genetic code. These are things I didn't know when I was younger, but my mother knew them in the 80s, and she dedicated her life's work to it and to changing things. And while my mother wasn't there the day that my twin sister Oni and I graduated from Harvard Medical School, my self-appointed godmother, Miss Aileen, was. Now let me tell you about Miss Aileen. She was an ordained minister from Alabama. She actually reminded me of my late grandmother. They used to be best friends. Miss Aileen was no nonsense, but she was doting with those in need. When my mother was sick, she would drive her to and from her chemotherapy appointments. She cooked meals for my mother. Well, on that graduation day, my twin sister Oni's name was called first, and then mine. We walked proudly across the stage, and as we did, I could hear someone wailing, "Dale!" Now, let me tell you something. Black families, we love to celebrate at a graduation. But this was beyond celebration. "Dale, your babies." I looked out into the audience to see my family and friends on either side of Miss Aileen holding her up as she wailed uncontrollably. In that moment, I understood that Miss Aileen appreciated the magnitude of what she was seeing. The perseverance and commitment that got us to that stage on that day, and the generations of struggle. And while my mother wasn't there, my extended family was. And my mother, her legacy continues. Legacy is for everyone. This book is for everyone who notices that something is wrong and I want to do something about it. And legacy is not just about practicing medicine or being from a family of physicians. Legacy is about finding your purpose and being part of the change. Thank you.